Chapter 1. New Doctor. The night that Rose Tyler met the Doctor was one she would never forget. She ran off with a man she hardly knew, a man with two hearts, to travel through time and space in his miraculous ship, the TARDIS. He introduced her to a world of monsters, madness, and something she so desperately needed: purpose. Before that, her life had been dull. Houses and shops, telly and cars, noise and people. The ordinary world. She was an idle shop girl from a South London council estate who'd left school at 16, lived with her mum, went out with a local lad called Mickey Smith, and wasted away months folding jumpers in a big swanky department store. Every day had been the same, with Rose telling herself she was so much better than this. She'd always planned to go back to school, sit those A-levels, become a paramedic, a cartoonist, a plumber, anything. Ordinary dreams, just going to waste. And then one day, Rose's shop blew up. She met an alien called the Doctor, and nothing in her life was ever the same again. As she swung on the end of a chain beneath the London Eye, fighting off an army of murderous mannequins, Rose realised she could do so much more. She discovered that day that a wooden blue police box could be bigger on the inside than outside, and her mind had expanded with it. Joyously! Aliens, monsters, invasions. It was all real, all true. The universe was so much bigger than work and her mum and her mate Shireen and jobs and debts and shopping on a budget, getting the bus home, eating chips and washing the smell of grease out of your jeans. Oh, so much bigger. Nothing made sense anymore, and everything was dangerous. And she, Rose Tyler, 19 years old, London shop girl, had saved the world. The Doctor had shown her a better way of living her life, and when he'd asked if she wanted to come with him, he'd given her a choice. Stay at home with her mum and her boyfriend, or chuck it all in for a chance to see the universe. And so Rose had run toward that blue box, through its open doors, into adventure. The Doctor showed her things beyond her imagination. He took her to see star systems far past the extent of human reach. They visited ancient civilizations thousands of years before their collapse. Together, the two of them faced the great evils of the universe, hand in hand. Rose knew the Doctor was in mourning. She knew his home planet had been destroyed in a war far beyond her comprehension. She knew he was the last of his people, a race called the Time Lords. And yet he remained wise and funny, fast and clever, cheeky and brave, and above all other things, kind. It confused her to no end sometimes. How could someone who had lost so much remain, in spite of it all, so fundamentally optimistic? Day by day, Rose found herself beginning to care for him more and more. Maybe, just maybe, she had fallen in love again, although that was a secret she wasn't ready to tell anyone just yet. Somehow she suspected the Doctor felt the same for her, but she'd never dared ask him. They were friends, best friends, travelling companions who hurled themselves across the galaxies and time streams. Besides, it would never work out. Rose rarely got a moment's rest nowadays, and it was better that way. She was the happiest she'd been in years. And then the Doctor had changed, right before her eyes. It had brought Rose crashing back down to Earth. The Doctor she'd known for, 6 months? A year in real time for her? Had vanished. He'd been replaced by a complete stranger, but a stranger who was still the Doctor. Reborn on Christmas Day with a brand new face, like a phoenix from the ashes. He was different. Rose was finding that out bit by bit. He appeared to have cast off the shackles of guilt he'd been living under for most of the time she'd known him. Or at least, he'd managed to put much of his pain and grief in the past, shedding it just as he'd shed his old body. Now he was mostly light and breezy and good-humoured, although sometimes he also had a colder, steelier side to him that was a little bit frightening. But Rose was relieved and delighted to find that the doctor still wanted her with him. In fact, he'd taken up their friendship again with barely a pause. Once again, she found herself facing that same choice. Stay behind with Mickey and Mum, or go with the doctor and travel the stars all over again. Of course she'd said yes. It was a new start for them both, a chance to pick up where they'd left off and see what else the universe had in store. Only this time, Rose was ready. She was going to make this work. They were leaving at last. Rose was all packed and ready to go. Couldn't wait, in fact. Snow was falling in the early evening, and she was once again standing outside that wooden blue police box, bidding farewell to her loved ones, both of whom were clearly unwilling to say farewell in return. Jackie Tyler hugged her daughter tightly, chirping well wishes and reminders to call home, mixed in with some strong hints to come back very soon. "Have you got everything?" Rose sighed. "I've got everything, Mum, don't worry." But Jackie was going to worry. One could see it on her face. So the goodbyes were drawn out a while longer, as mother and daughter exchanged hugs and kisses, and then I love yous, and then more hugs, until Rose's sweet smiles and quiet promises to be careful were all she had left to placate Jackie's small, desperate pleas that she shouldn't be leaving in the first place. Finally extricating herself from her mother's embrace, she turned to her old boyfriend, Mickey Smith. The two of them were no longer together as they had once been, but he was still so sweet on her, and she loved him for it. Tonight, Mickey had come to see her off, but Rose could tell he still didn't want her to go. He wasn't seeing anyone else. He'd told her that not long after Christmas, and immediately tried to kiss her. She'd pulled away at first, but then let him. And since kissing Mickey was nice and comfortable and familiar, Rose had kissed him quite a lot over the past few days. She wasn't sure if the doctor knew about that, but she guessed he probably wouldn't care. So she leaned in to kiss Mickey goodbye. It was brief, not much more than a peck on the lips, and more out of habit than anything else. "Love you," Mickey offered, holding her close. Which made Rose regret it immediately, for she found she couldn't say she loved him back. Not because it wasn't true, but because she didn't love him in the way he wanted her to. Not anymore. She knew she hadn't been fair to Mickey, and the guilt of that only made her treat him even more badly. "Bye," was all she could say back, smiling blithely. God, she was such a cow. She really had to handle this better. Next time she came back for a visit, she would have to talk to Mickey properly, say sorry for all the ways she treated him, and hope he would understand and still want to be friends. The tiny lamp on top of the box started to flash, and the air filled with the groaning wail of its intentions to depart. The TARDIS was ready to go. Now all it was missing was a passenger. Rose jumped quickly away, rushing towards the doors without looking back, a bounce in her step and a big grin on her face. She was home again. Jackie was already walking off, upset, back to her flat. But Mickey stayed behind, standing there alone in the deserted car park on the edge of the Powell estate to watch the only woman he had ever truly loved disappear inside the wooden blue box. "There she goes," he thought sadly. "Rose Tyler, running out of my life once more." He stood by and waited for the box to disappear as well. One day, Mickey knew, he would get tired of waiting. Maybe he should have asked if he could come with her. Or maybe it was time he went off and found an adventure of his own. Sounds of takeoff filled the ship's console room. The door creaked shut and Rose leaned against it, more than a bit out of breath. Almost at once, the tension appeared to ease from her shoulders. She peeled off the hand-knitted woolly hat, heavy winter coat and overstuffed camping rucksack her mother had insisted on sending her with, and dumped them all in a heap on the floor. Then she looked up, and there he stood, tall and gangly with a sharp, angular face and an electroshock of luxuriant hair as brown as his pinstriped suit. The Doctor. In his element, flitting around the console, pulling levers and playing with the controls, at one with his impossibly sized machine, just as he always was. When it came to the sheer otherworldliness of it all, Rose sometimes found it hard to tell where the TARDIS ended and the Doctor began. A brilliant smile lit up his face as he looked over and saw her, and their eyes met across the room. Clever eyes, brown like hers, bright and giddy and ready for adventure. Rose bounded over to him, her high-heeled ankle boots squeaking on the grated floors, blonde hair streaming behind her. The Doctor nodded her towards her usual spot at the TARDIS console, and she accepted the invitation eagerly. The Doctor was home, and he was happy. Finally, he was back. The old year had turned, and the new year had barely begun. But now that the festivities were over and he and Rose were both rested and well fed, he was ready to run again. The TARDIS was the same old ship, but the Doctor was a brand new man. "So where are we going?" Rose asked him happily, hardly caring what the answer was. The Doctor's wide grin sent a jolt of excitement down her spine. Did he know what he did to her when he looked at her like that? The sly wink as he spun a dial on the console with greater gusto than before suggested he did. The glass column at the very centre of the ship had already begun its slow, familiar chug up and down, rising and falling as a grinding, wheezing sound echoed overhead. The walls shook slightly around them as they hit some in-flight turbulence, and Rose was still holding tightly to the console when the Doctor leaned in and gleefully gave her the answer. "Further than we've ever gone before." One last lever was slammed into place, and the Doctor and Rose Tyler laughed together as the TARDIS whisked them away from London and into the wilderness of the time vortex. Rose peered hesitantly around the TARDIS doorway. They'd landed more gently than most other times. Wherever they were, though, it was windy. She took a deep breath of crisp, salty air, struggled to push her mane of wildly blowing hair away from her face, and stepped out onto foreign soil once more. Squinting into a bright blue sky, her stinging eyes widened. Night had turned into day. She was standing on the edge of a steep grassy hill overlooking a chilly river. Or maybe it was the sea. She couldn't quite tell. Stretching out to the horizon like some gigantic bejeweled carpet, the deep blue waters sparkled in a late morning sunshine. On the other bank, though, in the distance, was the largest, grandest, most impossible city Rose had ever laid eyes on. A bristling collage of high towers, domed megastructures and sleekly rounded metal, all of it glinting off the whizzing shuttles that were making their way between the glass spires and silver pinnacles in the familiar dance of a morning commute. That is, if morning commutes generally took place 100 feet above the ground. "It's the year 5,023," came a voice from behind her. The Doctor fell smoothly into step beside Rose with a slight smile on his face, his coat flapping in the wind. "We're in the galaxy M87, and this," he gestured at the hillside, The water, the sprawling city across the bay and the endless skies above. This is New Earth. That's just... For a moment, Rose just stood there with her mouth open, trying to get the right words out, and suddenly found herself laughing. That's just... The doctor's smile widened at the awe in her voice. Not bad, he finished for her, taking in the splendor of their surroundings himself. Not bad at all. Rose tried to shoot him a look that wasn't filled with the joy of discovery, and failed miserably. She was jumping up and down on the spot in excitement, feeling the give of the springy turf beneath her. Oh, I'm never going to get used to this, she shivered happily as the wind whipped around them. Never. Different ground beneath my feet. Different sky. Ooh, what's that smell? She sniffed curiously. There was something sweet in the blustery air. Sweet, fresh and sharp. The doctor stooped and pulled up a tuft of green grass at their feet to show her. A crisp, pleasant aroma of apples filled her nostrils. Applegrass, he said. Applegrass, Rose repeated, shaking her head in amazement as the blades blew away in the wind. It's beautiful. And it was. The sky was new, the ground was new, everything around them was just so new. She was about to give another delighted couple of hops just to see how high this world's gravity would take her when one of the flying shuttles came zooming past their heads a little too close. Rose squealed, ducking down, before she and the doctor broke out into peals of laughter. We'd better get out of the way, said the doctor eventually, tugging her towards the cliff tops. Could use a bit of a sit down. Come on, lovely weather. Might as well enjoy it. But Rose tugged him back. Can I just say... She paused, hesitated, and stared at the doctor for a long moment. It was so strange to call him the doctor again, this new man in his new clothes, an eccentric mix of pinstripes and plimsolls and a long brown duster coat, all of it on the smart side of casual. No daft big ears or black leather jacket or northern accent like before. Now, he talked a little like she did. When he'd first walked into her mother's flat and sat down with them for Christmas dinner, Rose had worried such an overwhelming difference would have prevented her from ever travelling with him again. But his eyes, his smile, the feel of his hand in hers, those proved to her that the doctor hadn't gone away, just changed a little. There was still that same fidgeting beneath his skin, that yearning to be free from the restrictions of one time, one place, free from work, family, and anything even close to resembling a normal life. Rose took his hand in both of hers. She'd miss this, she realised. The sights, the travelling, the newness of everything, the sheer wonder of seeing things no woman of her time ever would. She'd miss the doctor showing her the universe. I love this, she began again softly. Really, travelling with you, I love it. The doctor beamed at her words. Me too, he said simply. Come on. He pulled her into the breeze. She ran after him, blonde hair whipping in the gale as they left the TARDIS and the grassy hilltops behind them. Airborne cars swept over their heads like flights of fat metal swallows. The wind blew, the grass danced, and the smell of freshly picked apples wafted all around them in greeting. But Rose could also see that New Earth had 2 moons, and the grass under her feet was too green, and the skies above her head too blue, and the view across the bay too perfect. It somehow made her miss all of those little quirks and foibles and imperfections that made places in her own time seem so earthbound. Here it was the opposite. Here it seemed to Rose like something had saturated all of her senses, and, she supposed, the people of this planet liked it that way. They stopped in a meadow to rest. The doctor peeled off his long brown coat and spread it out over the ground like a picnic blanket. Flopping down comfortably onto his back, he crossed his feet at the ankles and looked up at her expectantly. "Well, are you just going to stand there?" Rose closed her eyes and bounced off the balls of her feet once more. This adventure would be a good one. She lent another smile to the doctor and fell back onto the grass. The two of them lay side by side on the doctor's coat, gradually relaxing into each other's company as they watched the shuttles pass over them with lazy smiles. Rose didn't mind the change of pace. It was surprisingly peaceful. Occasionally, she would look across and hold the doctor's gaze. He was so much younger now, reminding her of a scruffy schoolboy from down the street, all grown up. Well, most of the time. How did this face look so right to her already, when she'd only known it for less than a couple of weeks? They talked and laughed and teased each other as they lay there in the applegrass, about where they wanted to go next, about where he wanted to take her. The doctor and Rose, together once more. He reached across, took her hand, and Rose knew right then that everything would be all right. Her eyes were still processing this brand new landscape around her, taking in every last detail, feeling giddy with it all at every moment. She couldn't stop herself. She understood now why he'd brought her here. The last time they'd come this far, the doctor had shown her an ending. Now he was showing her a beginning. The next Earth. Earth 2. It was a place of hope. The scent of apples drifted along again in the breeze, and all was well in the world. As the cars soared to and fro overhead, something made Rose glance over her shoulder. Maybe it had been her imagination, but she could have sworn she'd just heard the tinkering of tiny legs in the grass behind them. A vague, prickly feeling on the back of her neck told her they were being watched. But when she looked, there was nothing there, and she turned back again just as the doctor's time-travelling tour guide instincts kicked into high gear. "So," he began, "the year 5 billion the sun expands and the earth gets roasted." Rose gave him a cheeky grin. "That was our first date." "We had chips," the doctor grinned back. It was their little joke together, fondly recalling the chip shop they'd gone to on Piccadilly after leaving Platform 1. That day, not so very long ago, when the doctor had begun to admit to himself that this special human girl with a face full of hair was so incredibly different from any other person he'd ever met in 900 years of space-time travel. It had been Rose's very first trip through time in the TARDIS, her introduction to the universe, and he'd brought her to watch her own world burn. The doctor had been a different man back then. He'd been wanting to impress her, just like he was impressing her today. How strange that the memory of that day now seemed to fill him with laughter, when he hadn't had much to laugh about at the time. His last body had been born out of pain and loss, and he dropped Rose in the deep end, just so she could understand a little of what it was like to no longer have your home planet standing in the skies. Still, Rose didn't seem to mind now. Or did she? Was she hoping this trip was a belated apology for that? Was she hoping for something more? The look she was giving him now, with that particular smile of hers he liked so much, tongue poking playfully between her teeth, was one the doctor found rather unnerving. "So anyway," he went on rather quickly, "planet gone, all rocks and dust, but the human race lives on spread out across the stars. As soon as the Earth burns up, they get all nostalgic, big revival movement. So when they find this place, a planet the same size as the Earth, same air, same orbit, lovely. They decide they like it, the call goes out and the humans move in." Rose propped herself up on her elbows to get a better view of the gleaming skyscrapers across the water. "And what's this city like then? No humans, yeah?" "Well," the doctor shrugged. "Maybe not pure humans like you, but close enough. It's the same old story every time. humanity went forth, sought out new life, and danced. Rose filled in for him cheekily. Got a fairly good idea of that from Captain She broke off and shook her head at some distant memory. Anyway, so they're humanish. Yep, he nodded, barreling swiftly onwards. Conquered the galaxies, they did, and shared their DNA with every compatible species they could find. And you human beings, you're plenty compatible, always changing and adapting, indomitable. The city's like that too, completely human and completely alien all at the same time. Molto bene. What's the city called? Now it was the doctor's turn to grin. New York. Oh, come on. It is. It's the city of New York. Well, strictly speaking, it's the 15th New York since the original, so I guess that makes it New York. Rose giggled, watching him as he rattled this off, and went quiet. Another smile, almost wistful, slowly twisted her lips. In some ways, although he was a changed man, she could tell somehow, looking down into those dark brown eyes, that it was still him, still the doctor. It was there in the way the smiles leapt so easily to his face, still with that strange sadness about them. The way he still started half his sentences off with, "Rose Tyler?" as if her name were a single word. The way he could be impossibly old one moment and impossibly youthful the next. All of him unfamiliar, and yet completely and utterly the same. After a moment, the doctor broke off and looked at her. "Penny for 'em," he said. "What? You're lost in thought somewhere." Rose simply shook her head. "You're just so different." It was easy now, telling him that, even though it wasn't quite what she was thinking. He returned her soft smile. New doctor." They laughed again, and a comfortable lull settled over the conversation as the two of them went back to watching the hovercars buzz under the shifting clouds, both content in the companionable silence. But Rose could only sit still for so long on a completely new world like this one, and was soon pushing herself to her feet. "Can we go and visit New York then?" she asked the doctor eagerly, reaching an arm down to help him up. "The city's so good they named it twice." "Well," the doctor brushed stray bits of applegrass off his coat before shrugging it on again, a lucky feat in this wind. "I thought we might go there first." And he nodded towards a tall building which stood just down the coast from them, slightly apart from the rest of the city. Rose squinted to get a better look at the stark white tower in the distance. "Why, what is it?" Whatever it was huge, curving in two like a billowing sail and perched right on the edge of the water. It towered imperiously over the rest of the shoreline. And whoever the architects were, they'd had it built directly into the cliffs, like some dignified modern lighthouse, though taller, wider, loftier. Row after row of windows glinted golden in the sunlight, and on one elegantly sculpted wall, a large crescent moon was painted inside a vivid emerald circle. "Some sort of hospital," said the doctor, who was fishing for something in his coat pockets. "The green moon on the side, that's the universal symbol for hospitals." "What, do you mean like the Red Cross?" The doctor didn't answer. He just pulled a familiar flap of leather out of his pocket and was studying it intently. The wallet showed only a piece of blank white paper, but Rose recognized it as the psychic paper that the old doctor sometimes used to carry around with him. "Saves a lot of time," he'd told her then, explaining that it showed people who read it whatever they wanted to see, which certainly came in handy when you needed to get in and out of restricted areas or gatecrash a party. But it could also occasionally pick up messages if the sender was feeling psychically inclined, or else trying really, really hard. The doctor flipped over the paper to show Rose some big, blocky words scrawling themselves across the page with an unseen hand. "I got this just before we left. he said, with a hint of obvious curiosity in his voice. "Looks like someone wants to see me." "Ward 26, please come," Rose read over his shoulder. "That's a bit powerful, projecting a thought all the way across time and space." "Exactly," agreed the doctor as he tucked the paper away. "Well worth a visit." Rose frowned in mild surprise. "And here I thought we were just sightseeing." But she was smiling brightly again when she looped her arm around his. "Come on then, let's go and buy some grapes." The teasing continued as together, the Doctor and Rose began trekking their way across the unfamiliar hills towards the hospital on the shore. Neither of them noticed the small metal spider in the applegrass, following close behind.